Hello and welcome here to the Eastern Clash in the mecca of esports here in South Korea, where we will have some of the best Heroes of the Storm players in the world here in attendance. And not just behind the computers, we are also joined by Western Clash champion Snitch here, joining us at the analyst desk, as well as the birthday boy, Caldor. We are ready for action because the Eastern Clash, always that high octane. Snitch, how you feeling now being on this side of things?
I mean, I'm very excited to, work here at the Eastern Clash. Excited to see some great games from Korea and China, and I hope we have a great day.
Caldor, almost like a second home to you. Esports is what you know, but you've also been around this environment, lived here in South Korea. What can we expect?
Definitely the Koreans going absolutely ham today, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, back in Korea is good. Food is great. How did you enjoy it so far?
The food has been good. I stray away from all the spicy food. It's hot. Reminds me of Florida.
Yeah. So the first thing that happens is we're trying to grab some food, and then immediately him, and I think it was Techa, going in and was like, yeah, we can't have spice. I'm like, okay, what spicy level are we talking about? Any spicy level. So that limits your options a lot.
Well, you know, it's been pretty limited thus far, but what won't be limited is action here at the Eastern Clash, because we have these teams. Eastern Clash is never without drama. When we look at the Korean teams, we know that they've been dominant in most of the clashes that we've seen them in thus far, and it's always been the back and forth. We never know who's going to win. The rivalry of Ballistics and Jinji, but of course Tempest and BlossoM will also try and get in there. But we also have 4 Chinese representatives here as those teams are coming in, trying to crack their way potentially into the top 4 throughout this weekend. We will be here for 3 days throughout the weekend. We'll get through the first part of the bracket today, as we'll get to that shortly. But for these teams, these lineups and everything, we know how important it is to the Korean teams, because Snitch, more importantly, you know, for Europe, you got that extra spot to BlizzCon. Yeah,
I mean, I think Korea obviously won another slow at BlizzCon. They've been consistently a top region performing in the world, and I'm sure they'd love to have a third team representing them.
Well, we're going to find out. We will take a look at the prize pool to see what these teams are fighting for, not just for that third spot, but also $100,000 at stake for these teams. We'll take a look at that momentarily, as here we go. First place taking home $30,000, $20,000, $15,000 and down. And we know there's a lot of prestige around this, and we look at these teams historically in the past. We look at the likes of Jinji. They've struggled to win the Eastern Clash, but they told us just recently, a couple of days ago, that, hey, sometimes that's not a bad thing, because that gives them the drive to make it to the mid-season brawl in BlizzCon to try and win the big championship.
They actually feel that there's a little bit of a curse happening right now, that whenever you win the Eastern Clash, you don't succeed at the international tournament. So they're in this awkward spot right now, and they're, do you really want to win here? Just memeing around, of course, a little bit, but they say that this time they really want to take it. And I mean, of course, they have the best chances heading into it right now. I think the big story is, once again, what can we expect from China? Are the Chinese teams strong enough to defeat some of the Koreans here? And our first game of the day is actually one of the most interesting ones when it comes to that, because we're having SPT going up against BlossoM.
Well, let's take a look at the bracket so we can see how the day will unfold, because as you said, SPT versus BlossoM, probably the most intriguing day one matchup, at least in the top part, because it will be the likes of every Chinese team going against the Korean team. And so that has generally favored Korea. We know SPT coming in, even hearing from their counterparts in China saying that SPT could potentially have the best chance, and they are going against the number 4 seed of Korea. But when we start to look at this, anything else stand out to you, Snitch?
I mean, you know, like you said, that just seems like the story of the tournament. Every Chinese team is SPT, SPT, SPT. They're focusing on SPT for their team to take the match, and I think it will be the closest one we'll see today.
Well, obviously, we will get through the upper part of that bracket, but we'll also have the 2 lower bracket matchups, which means 2 teams will be going home at the end of the day. We will see how that unfolds as we go. Best of 3 will be the format during day 1, and beyond in the final 2 days will be the best of 5. So it will be shorter series today, but always brings up the question of, does China bring a little bit of extra flavor to their drafts to try and get some upsets?
Exactly. Most of the Chinese teams have told us that they have a few pocket strategies prepared, so that might be something that we're going to see today. The same is true for BlossoM, though. They have stated from the get-go, listen, if we go up against an opponent where we think with a standard game we might not be able to take them down, we have something prepared where we are willing to attempt to surprise them. So the first series could be pretty explosive.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, obviously, China have a history of these wacky picks. You know, they've always loved the Alex Strauzer. Like, they've had a lot of interesting heroes close in the past, but BlossoM have, again, like you said, shown like these like Anna Cho'Gath, these like crazy compositions. So I think both sides could be playing something really, really crazy in this series.
It was really interesting when we spoke to their players. It's just they're having a lot of fun with what they do. They know, and we heard, you know, we're going to hear from them later on. It's about cracking into that top 3 of Korea, which has been so controlled by the three-headed monster of Gen.G, of Ballistics, and that of Tempest. They've always been 1, 2, and 3 at certain points, but obviously at the Eastern Clash, it's been Ballistics recently that has kind of reigned supreme over the last few, so it will be BlossoM trying to crack into that top 3. So for teams like that, we know that they come in there, but they have the star power to back it up. This is Meryday's first time back at a LAN event in quite some time, and over a year at this point. And Snitch, you know Meryday very well from your competitive days.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've had a lot of games against Meryday throughout my time, and it's very, very exciting to see him play again. I think that is actually a really interesting storyline about BlossoM in general, is they have Meryday, they have Hong Kono, even Wiz, who's this long-term player, back in his, you know, North America days playing with Naventic and teams like that. Like, there's so many, you know, storylines here from the past all coming together to this modern BlossoM.
We'll see how this does play out. We're going to take a closer look at our teams. We're going to first take a look at SPT and hear a word from them.
我们队组建的比较早，然后上一次东区决赛的话，跟这一次东区决赛换了一个后排，然后感觉自己改变还是比较多的吧，就进步的比较多吧。就是整体的打法就比较进攻方面比较凶悍了，然后对于防守方面我们也在加强，就是队伍全面的在进步吧。因为我们之前我们赛区就整体比较弱吧，因为我们之前厉害的那一批选手转型了嘛，然后出国的成绩一直不是很好，然后这次的话，我觉得我们目标就是拿个前3嘛，就是改变之前就是包括一些解说啊，一些选手对我们赛区的看法。至于就是目前目标先这样定嘛。
Cracking into the top 3, we heard from Masaka trying to change the way that other teams view SPT, because they have been a team that just recently did not have the success that we've known them to historically have, but they find themselves back at the top of China. They find themselves back trying to crack into the top. They understand that, hey, we are the underdogs, but they feel that the talent has excelled with this team. This is not an easy task for them, but is the talent there when we look at China trying to crack into that top 3? It's never been easy for them.
I think at this point they just have to try and beat at least one of the Korean teams. Yeah, that has to be the goal, because traditionally when you look at not only the Eastern Clash actually, also at the international events, China has struggled a lot, and it has been a really big problem for them, also from a reputation perspective. So for them, the goal to break into the top 4 at least, and make sure that one of the Korean teams is not able to make it into those semifinals, that would be a huge success. And the best chance that they have is in that first match against BlossoM. It's also a best of 3. We talked a bit how that can cater to their style when they have maybe a draft prepared. If you just snag off one game and then you win a second map, all of a sudden you find yourself in the next round of the winner bracket. And that has to be the goal for them. Because if you look towards the Koreans, from their perspective, they expect to be all up at the top 4, all of them. Even BlossoM saying, okay, we might be at the bottom right now of the Korean standings at this tournament here, but we're definitely not going to lose to China. That just is not going to happen.
Snitch, you have been a front runner for so long in your career. What has it been about other teams that you've seen, most recently Leftovers, that they have a characteristic, a trait about them that allows them to come in and maybe excel where they can't find other ways to stay near the top?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just like to see the confidence coming in from SPT. You know, they know that they're underdog, but they're willing to play around that, you know, and use that to their advantage.
Well, we're going to take a look at Team BlossoM and hear from them on their matchup and their standing here at the Eastern Clash.
후반 한타를 좀 잘하는 팀 같아요, 지금 당장은. 그리고 뱀픽도 곤다르가 잘하니까 뱀픽 괜찮고 중후반 한타 잘하는 팀, 이런 느낌인 것 같아요.
묘수라고 할까요? 그런 픽들을 많이 준비하고 있고, 개인 연습 같은 거 할 때도 이런저런 거 많이 해보면서 상대가 정석으로 붙었을 때 안 될 것 같으니까 변수로, 변칙적으로 플레이를 하려고 노력을 하고 있습니다.
빅3라고 불리는 팀들 중에 한 팀이 끌어내리고 저희가 그 자리에 들어가는 게 목표이기 때문에 그냥 목표죠. 목표만 그렇게 잡고 있어요.
제가 여기 들어오기 전도 4등이었기 때문에 이제 3등을 한번 해야 증명해내는 과정이 아닐까라고 생각을 해서 그런 증명은 필요하다고 선수들과 재밌고 그리고 좋은 경기를 보여드리도록 노력을 할 거고 저희 팬분들이 즐거웠으면 좋겠어서 저는 팬분들에게 최선을 다하는 모습을 보여드리고 싶습니다.
Having fun is something we know Hong Kono to do. The last time we heard from him, he's also coming out of retirement. It's not because he left the scene. He was casting Korea just as recently as last phase. But the last time we heard from him at BlizzCon last year, he gave us the infamous Murden. Only Haymaker. And this is a team that has the star potential. They have the playmaking potential when we look at the likes of former champions of Merryday and Hong Kono, but they have a more carefree attitude going forward.
I mean, talking about Hong Kono, the two things, you already alluded to it a little bit, but when we talked to him and he said, okay, he's coming back now, why is that? He's like, yeah, casting wasn't really me, it's too boring, I need more excitement. So he comes back as a player. And when you talk about his Haymaker choices, apparently he got down-vetoed hard by the rest of the team, who just said, dude, listen, Haymaker is not going to be a thing for us. You need to spec into the avatar. We want you with a bit more of a safer playstyle, even though with Haymaker you can create those possibilities in plays, but apparently the rest of the team wasn't really bad.
Snitch, you like Haymaker, right?
Oh, big fan of Haymaker, you know. I've had my scrims where JPL locked in Haymaker. They're always an experience, I'll say that.
Well, speaking of experience, it's interesting when we look at this team of Team BlossoM to see the experience between Hong Kono and Merryday alone. And then, you know, we've mentioned Wiz and the likes of those names, but being led by that type of experience has to be an advantage when you come to a LAN environment.
Definitely, and the fun part about it is like talking to them was also that half of the team is like, okay, we're here to learn, we're here to have fun, we're here to enjoy the event and make sure that we are just learning a little bit. And the rest is like, no, wait a second, we're definitely wanting to win here. So they have a bit of everything. Like you have a couple of tryhards on the team, a couple of people that just temper it down slightly. So they have a really good mix for a tournament like this and just come in as the underdog. It's a bit reminiscent of what you alluded to earlier with Leftovers, where they have just a lot of drive.
Snitch, when we look at the likes of Super Perfect Team, they don't lack star power either. Some of those names are names that you've seen for years coming out of the Chinese region. What could be some of their best strengths to take down China to start the day? Or to take down Korea?
You know, you always think about Misaka throughout the years. His tank play has become very, very, you know, iconic from a Chinese region and a Chinese team. I think that's, you know, we're mainly looking, I think, him to probably be a playmaker for SPT coming up against BlossoM. But as we said, both of these teams are very tricky. Both of these teams have a lot of weird picks. Like, we could be looking at very, very unconventional games here.
That's the one thing that we always get out of China is sometimes we get the unconventional. They have been playing very meta, but every now and again you get that game where something springs up. You're like, okay, I wasn't expecting this, and maybe that's a strategy they can devise to move through and say, hey, we can shake this up. Again, best of 3 on day 1. You just need 2 wins.
I also want to come back to something that Snitch talked about, Misaka, because I feel while you're absolutely right on this, it also can sometimes be a bit of a liability. We had games at the mid-season brawl, for example, or international tournaments in the past, where he doesn't deliver or he seems a bit shaky, and it feels like that affects the entire team. If he is not really on point, then the team is falling apart pretty quickly.
He is their rock. He is the playmaker. When I asked him about the Warrior meta, right now it seems between the Diablo, the Garrosh, the Muradins of the world, these are the playmaking warriors that we know, and sometimes you do lean on that. From a frontline perspective, obviously going forward, you want them to be the initiator in a lot of these fights, and for Misaka, as you said, there has been times where that pressure has gotten there, so it's a matter of making plays but playing within yourself and allowing your teammates to excel around that. You know, we come back to another hero that we've seen spring up most notably at the Western Clash was Maev, a hero that you play quite a bit. It's something that when we look over at BlossoM, Gondar, things of that nature, we see that diverse hero pool. Is that something that can shake this up for teams that maybe not be the Maev teams that we see showing up here?
I do think there will be a natural advantage to teams who have practiced and prepared Maev. I think she's very strong in the meta right now, and I think we proved that during our run at the Western Clash. I think the macro game she just brings, you know, ever since the buffs to her wave clear, she just feels like she controls the map so heavily. So I think if teams here are practiced on Maev, they will have a natural advantage over teams that aren't.
Gen.G is going to be one of those teams we'll see later. We know that Rich is very well practiced on that. You or Rich, who's the better Maev right now?
I don't even know who Rich is. Is he a new player? Is this his debut tournament?
Oh, we're still waiting on that Gazlo 1v1, by the way.
I think I beat Rich in the Gazlo 1v1.
Yeah, but we need it publicly though. We need it publicly, and we got Gazlo last week at the Western Clash. How was that Snitch going against Gazlo in a Grand Championship?
I think if Rich was playing for Leftovers in that game, they may have had a chance. But in that game in particular, Gazlo did not look good.
You never know how it will look, but we are going to wait for our game. Snitch always looking good, styling. Snitch, you know, we get to this moment, we get to day number 1, we get early in the day. Are there any jitters that ever come up? Are these experienced players, anything of that nature, or do you just show up and perform?
I mean, we talk about how they have a lot of experience, you know, but like you said, this is Merriday's first LAN event in a while. This is Hong Kono's first LAN event in a while. Like, there may be some nerves here for BlossoM, and, you know, even for SPT, they're playing in another country, they're playing as an unfamiliar region. Like, I think both teams could have nerves here, but normally these things do dissipate as the game gets in, so hopefully, you know, neither team will have too many struggles.
I mean, one of the important things also to note is that for at least the top 2 teams out of China, we don't have any visa issues this time. We're looking at the bottom 2, then again, we're talking about substitute players, but at least for the one in SPT, they are here with their full lineup, and that's actually really important considering that in the past that was not always a given.
Well, we are ready to get into game number 1, and we are going to take a look at our map ban and our map pool to see where we will be headed here to start our day with Super Perfect Team taking on Team BlossoM. We'll have that momentarily.
Or not.
Well, you know, we'll get there. We are just about underway for this, and I think when we do get to that map pool, it is going to be interesting. Do we see these teams? Obviously, there's more Cursed Hollow playing in Korea, things of that nature. You mentioned the macro element that Maev brings, but when you're a Chinese team coming in against Team BlossoM Korea, they love to fight. Do you try and out-macro them, a China team that we know loves to fight, the Chinese Bush metas we know exist? Is it more, do we look for the less macro-oriented battlegrounds, or are we looking for some of the more, like we want a team fight, or do we want the macro play?
I mean, the one thing that I actually took from interviews that we had with them is that they talked a little bit about how, while team fighting is still a big thing for them, they want to play safer in their decision-making in the late game. And I actually think that's a really cool thing to hear. The question is just, can they translate that into the games? Because we've seen it from China a lot, that they sometimes establish an advantage going into the mid-game and then make questionable decisions in the late game where they could play it patient, try to, for example, get a level 20 advantage over the opponent, but are willing to take the fight just barely before that happens, lose it, and all of a sudden everything they worked for is gone. So if they really have now found the discipline in their practice to just carry that into those late game stages, make the safer play, and just stay back for a little bit to get that later advantage, that would be great. And that could actually be the big difference of winning games against Korea or just losing all of those.
I believe we're ready for the map bans now, as we should be taking a look at that soon. We'll wait for that to come up, but you know, is there any strategy that we would potentially see come out differently that you would like to see from China to maybe take down the stalwart, the team fighting that we know that BlossoM likes to play around?
I mean, I think it's tough to say. I think, you know, both teams could be very competent in team fighting. Like, this is the first game of the tournament. It's tough to really have a read on how the meta is going to play out. Like, as you said, maybe a macro game would be good against, you know, BlossoM, who I've said they do feel like they're a very good team fighting team. So maybe that is something that SPT will be looking at. But I think at the same time, SPT are also a very team fight focused team, so it may be hard for them to adapt to a completely different style.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. There's the map. We're going Tomb of the Spider Queen. There we go. I got it now. The map ban, it's going to be Volskaya and Braxis, as we're going to be going to Tomb of the Spider Queen. Thoughts on Tomb of the Spider Queen?
I mean, we talk about macro, and now we have a really small map, and it's actually the Chinese choice. And from the Chinese teams, we expect a lot of team fighting that they're trying to do. The one thing that I have, like normally when we talk to the players before the tournament, we have, the last time that we were at the Eastern Clash, all the Chinese teams echoed, listen, we want to play the macro game this time. And all of us were really surprised because we're like, wait a second, you're known for your team fighting, so you're all of a sudden telling me you want to play the macro game? And then the tournament starts, and they abandon everything that has to do with macro and just go brawling all game long. So I like to hear from them that they're saying, hey, we are a little bit more disciplined now. We want to have the macro style. But I'll believe it when I see it. Because China is still China, and they love to fight. They love to be all out there. And starting with Tomb as a first map, this is a map where you have quick rotations, you have close lanes, you have a lot of action going, a lot of snowball. And that seems to be more the traditional Chinese style that we normally see.
Well, we normally see Chromie a lot in Europe. I don't think we're going to see much Chromie here as much between these two teams. They like to brawl. They like to throw down. We saw Garrosh rise in priority, especially when we were at the Western Clash. We saw Garrosh fall off. Now he's starting to climb back up. What was it about the meta that we saw start to shift? Because it has been more prevalent in Korea to see Garrosh as of late. I can imagine we'll see that coming in here. But what was the reasoning maybe that we see Garrosh start to rise in priority at Western?
I think Garrosh just quickly became one of those heroes people forgot about a little bit. Like, there was a little bit of a placebo nerf, I think. Like, they kind of took him away from the meta a bit, but then people started picking him again in scrims, and he just had really good success. Like, we found a lot of success with Garrosh. JPL was very confident with Garrosh, and I think that kind of trickles down very fast when we find something that we like to play. I think, you know, Tomb could be a map we could definitely see it. And I think it's a very exciting map to start off with, actually, because, you know, there could be a lot of interesting team fights early in the game.
You pointed something out, and I want to follow up on that as well, because I really think it's a good question. Chromie as a hero. I mean, this is still before the final changes, but it's a really interesting hero in Europe, and now that we have you in the desk, that's a good opportunity to go a little bit deeper with that. She has an absolutely abysmal win rate when you look at just European play, but you were one of the few teams that have success with her and pick her in good situations. But what's your general thought process on how Chromie performs on a general basis in Europe and how well you guys still do with her when you draft her? Do you feel it's just because you pick her in the optimal scenario, or do you think that other teams underperform with her?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I do think Tomb of the Spider Queen is one of Chromie's most favorable maps, especially paired with the Joanna. There's a lot of wave clear, brings very strong early game rotations, very, very significant in the early game if a team has this. It allows them to dominate the rotations and the pay-ins very, very easily. Outside of this map, you know, Volsky is another good Chromie map, but I think she's definitely fallen off on Dragon. She just doesn't seem to fit the bot lane as well as she used to, but a lot of teams have been very slow to adapt to that, I feel. They're just, you know, they keep kind of picking this like raw Chromie, and it doesn't seem to work as well as it used to. Yeah, I feel like she's definitely a lot more flexible in kind of this rotation style where you could just play her with a Joanna and control the early game that way.
Well, let's go back to the Garrosh point, because it seemed that Garrosh started to fall out of the meta because Jaina started to rise. Jaina gives you frontline control. Then Phoenix all of a sudden is there, and Phoenix Jaina, one of those has a slow option. It's hard for Garrosh to engage. Then Deckard came out, and all of a sudden we've got more CC from the support range, and it seemed like there was so much control that now we see teams pairing it with the Deckard, things of that nature, to try and keep that alive. Is that as necessary, or do you think that was just a circumstantial thing? Like, having a frontline control over Garrosh is good, but is it necessary to maybe pair one of those and ban the other? Like, what's the thought process around pairing there to try and deny some of the counters towards Garrosh?
To be honest, I think Garrosh is actually very, very flexible as far as his support pairings go. Stukov, for example, is a big hero that we started playing with the Garrosh because there's so much synergy between the two. If you follow up the silence with the Garrosh combo, you can throw them back into the silence. But there's so many ways to play those two together. The early picking the Garrosh we found freed us up a lot in the draft. So we'd have like Deckard obviously has a lot of good synergy with him, but you could have the Stukov. Like, it allowed you to be a little bit more flexible with some of your other picks, even the one, you know, because of the Garrosh at the time.
You talk about Stukov, it's actually something that I want to talk about a little bit, because after we've seen Stukov like just skyrocket after the Western Clash when Zalats brought it in, he fell off a bit because everyone started to figure out, okay, how do we play around Stukov? We can first of all try and dive him, he doesn't really have an escape tool. We can try and burst heroes because he doesn't have that consistent burst heal that can save someone. But now after we've seen the third ban come in, all of a sudden Stukov pops up again. Is that because you can now ban out some of those heroes that would usually threaten him, or where do you feel why all of a sudden the resurgence of Stukov is it? Is that just because the other supports got a little bit nerfed, or does that come through the third ban and now you're being able to draft him in safer scenarios?
I mean, I think the third ban is definitely a significant part, as you say. Yeah, you can ban out a lot of Stukov counters, but also this meta fits Stukov very, very well. If I think three heroes that work well with Stukov, I think Garrosh, Maiev, Medivh, and all of these heroes are first pick worthy right now, I think, in the meta. They all just synergize with Stukov so well between, you know, tethering back in, or Medivh, as you say, giving Stukov that safety, making it so it's not a weakness. I think when you do have the Stukov, there's two styles you want to play. You can either play the defensive style, help support the Stukov, keep him alive, have him look for combos, or you play the super aggressive style with a Maiev or a Garrosh, and you focus on making the plays, and then they can't dive your Stukov because they're dead.
Well, yeah, just real quick, we had an update. We had an issue that should be resolving momentarily, just 1 to 2 minutes. Should be back going as we wait for one player to get back in. So we are about to be underway. The good news is we have Snitch up here. We get to pick his brain. This is what it's been like all week. We just ask him questions and force him to answer. So it's been really good for us. We're just going to spout off everything that he told us this week.
And just following up on the Stukov question again, because one of the things that we've seen with Stukov in the past, and the hero has disappeared a little bit, was Anubarak. One of the reasons was that Anubarak suffers a little bit from the lower health pool. If you engage with your E, for example, you play into a Garrosh, all of a sudden you're like super vulnerable, gets thrown in. But when Stukov originally appeared, that was one of the heroes that was oftentimes paired with him, because the whole idea is you jump in, dive, get the stun in, the follow-up, silence, and then you try and get that kill. Is that a hero that might pop up again, or do you think the weaknesses of Anubarak are just too big and can't really overcome the benefits that he brings?
I think from my perspective, I still think Anubarak's one of the weaker tank choices right now. I do think he can fit in the meta, but it's with the third bans, obviously there'll be more tanks removed a lot of the time if that is something the teams want to do, and that's kind of where I think he'll show up. I think Cocoon definitely obviously still gets a lot of value in every game it's in. So I think Anub can always have a place, but as you say, his weaker health pool and like his struggle to sustain may be a problem if he is drafted.
Don't tell that to Korea though. we're getting Anubarak this week, and I can guarantee you that. And guys, we are ready. We are ready for the draft to get underway as we have resolved all the issues. It's time to head into game number 1 here on Tomb of the Spider Queen.
I'm actually hyped for this, especially after the Western Clash that was just started. I really want to see where also the regional differences are in the draft. I mean, we had very clear ban priorities when we looked towards the Western Clash, especially within day 2 and day 3. And if that's something that's reflected within the Asian regions as well, that would be pretty cool. But of course, differences here make it already exciting looking towards BlizzCon, because the international clashes of metas is always what we want the most.
We know Phoenix has extremely high priority across all regions. Very good wave clear, very good team fighting potential, and does have that frontline control. So no surprise that we get Phoenix banned out here. Especially with the Malfurion changes. We look at the Korean region, it was a lot of Malfurion Phoenix in the first pick slot. We see the Maiev ban coming in there. But now all of a sudden with Malfurion taking what's perceived to be a step back, Phoenix now going to show up in that first ban slot.
I mean, Phoenix is also one of the best heroes of Meta DC with a 5-0 here so far, so BlossoM definitely doing their homework. This is actually something that I really like from the Korean teams in general, that no matter who they go up against, they usually make sure that they have a good understanding of what the opponent prioritizes. And that's one of the criticisms that we had of Chinese teams in the past, where they show up to an event and it just feels like they haven't really studied what the opponent's region is prioritizing and what they're trying to do. So I like the ban priority that comes out for BlossoM, because they definitely researched what SPT usually favors.
Genji being the only hero in Korea that had a 100% participation rate or involvement rate, that's only because he gets banned. Like every game, I think he only got let through, actually it was like 99%, I think he only got let through like 1 game in all of the phase. I don't think we're going to see him this weekend.
But what we're going to see is Diablo. And Snitch, how was game 1 against Leftovers there? I feel you guys probably still have a couple of nightmares of Mopsy Diablo on that map, right? That guy just seemed unkillable.
I mean, you say that, but I think we were ending up killing Mopsio in the mid-late game, and that was what brought us back. But yeah, Diablo, obviously a very strong pick in the meta right now. One of the top tanks for sure, especially with this Garrosh ban. I think it's very, very sensible for them to first rotate this Diablo. It's just so strong on the map. Any map, really. Diablo is fitting, you know, almost perfectly any game. I'm going to assume we're going to see Lightning Breath. It's very much a staple in Korea. They like to play these Lightning Breath styles, you know, you control the team fight rather than going for the APOT one-shot.
It's a lot of slows and a lot of crowd control between those first 3 picks, and conveniently leaving all the damage on the back end of this. Jimmy Rayner obviously picked up for SPT, and Muradin, we know Masaka will be very impactful on that hero. But the lack of damage, we know that Korea loves to prioritize that solo laner before second ban, but the fact that we've got Diablo, Deckard, and Blaze is probably more surprised that we don't get a single damage dealer pre-second ban.
I mean, looking also at the draft, yeah, Hammer being banned out, we've seen that originally from Korea, and then especially Europe started to emulate that style of play a lot. But looking at the draft so far, the one hero that is definitely lacking that you would have expected, at least in Europe, to pop up a lot earlier is Urel, that gets now banned on the second spot. Does that surprise you a bit, Snitch, that Urel comes in so late on the map here with the priority that we've seen now from SPT on getting Reyna and Muradin in the first rotation?
Yeah, I think it's one of those heroes that we definitely could have seen at any point in the draft so far, but at the same time, like, I don't think any of these picks are necessarily wrong or bad.
Yeah.
I actually like the opening that BlossoM have gone for here, and I was curious if SPT would see the Hammer. I think the Sergeant Hammer would have been very, very nice to them, and I think it's kind of what they were setting up for. I do like the Leoric as well into the Diablo and Blaze, both very good matchups, so I think SPT are actually drafting very well into what BlossoM have opened with here.
So Hanzo has been a hero that has dropped off quite a bit, and we see Rayner already picked up, and Phoenix picked up Sergeant Hammer, all the auto attack heroes we generally see. What starts to fall into favor once you get beyond that, since Hanzo's not as popular anymore?
I mean, it's tough to say outside of Hanzo here, you know. I think the Junkrat, obviously very, very nice on Tomb, fits very well. Thrall, actually. I think that's, you know, a very Korean style actually to play. We see Tempest a lot as well. They like this Thrall with the Junkrat. I think they've played the Junkrat solo range a few times. We've tried this a lot. The Tyre is very, very nice for these kind of like triple melee comps because they have a lot of lockdown and a lot of solid engage. But having the Rip Tyre allows you to follow that up very quickly with a lot of burst damage and quickly secure a team fight.
Is that third melee something that concerns you though, if you're looking towards SPT and you see Leoric, who of course benefits from that to an extent? You have Muradin here, who is healing static, gets a lot of hits. Bit of a wild Zeratul coming in there at the end. Didn't see that one coming.
Zeratul on Tomb is not something we see too often.
Yeah, I think I'm very, very surprised by the Zeratul. I just wonder if it's kind of like a way they practice the map in general. I think it could definitely work. I'm kind of curious to see how the Thrall and the 4-man will play out against the Zeratul, because both of these picks obviously aren't super standard tomb rotation picks. So I wonder if they're going to play a lot to the mid-bot side in this sort of draft, have Zeratul trying to control the bot lane matchup as much as he can, and make sure the Leoric snowballs, and try and get turn-ins from there.
Trying to get that against the Blaze, though, is no easy task. We know Blaze obviously has a lot of self-sustain in that bot lane. Is there any chance that they do get that pick? Obviously, it's going to be strictly reliant on that Leoric, but it's going to take a lot more of the heavy rotation, potentially a 3 to 4-man rotation to get that pick, or you think that's enough between the Leo Zeratul?
I mean, I don't think they necessarily need to find a kill. I think just controlling the lane, making sure Leoric's winning and always getting the clear, it allows the Leoric to rotate mid and control the mid wave. It allows Leoric to get his gems in whenever he can. I think it's just playing the Zeratul to the bot side here is probably what I think SPT will be looking for, just trying to control that bot lane matchup and making sure they can snowball from there.
But with the Zeratul pick, aren't we automatically worried for the wave clear, especially the fence against web weavers that we see on SPT? Because I look at this and I think, okay, if BlossoM secures a turn-in early on, then SPT has really a problem getting back into the game if they can't find these kills that you're talking about.
Yeah, I do think the 3-man, you know, as I'm saying now, for SPT is looking a little bit shaky. Obviously, they drafted the Rhaegar. I think that was kind of like their way to try and deal with it, having the Lightning Shield wave clear on the Muradin, using the Raynor, you know, the Q to try and clear the wave as effectively as they can. But I agree. I think it does look a little bit shaky if they are struggling to get these snowball engages with the Zeratul.
My favorite part about talking to pro players is you never actually use game terminology. It's ability buttons, and then you have code names for all the different heroes and some of the different abilities. It's just always different. It's always something different that we see. But yeah, that is one thing that I think is very standout. It's one of the reasons I think we don't see Zeratul here, not having that substantial wave clear. We'll see if that comes in.
I mean, normally when we're seeing Zeratul, the thought process that you immediately have is like late game, right? Like he scales into the 16 and gets all that power that he has there in team fights. So that's the one thing that worries me a bit with it. If they find kills, it's going to be great, but yeah, if BlossoM starts getting those turn-ins, it's going to be rough.
Well, a lot of folks out there do see that BlossoM might be the favorites as we've got the votes underway. You can get your vote in chat throughout each of these games using those hashtags, but obviously a lot of BlossoM fans in this first series.
You can't really go wrong in game number 1 voting for Korea.
It's, you can pretty much say that about all of our series today. Again, the Korea-Chinese matchups throughout our first 4 series is going to be the name of the game, so that will be something we'll keep an eye on. But obviously, being in Korea, this is my first time. It's experiencing the esports culture is very different here than it would be, say, back at SoCal, probably the closest we've got, right?
SoCal is actually surprising to that extent because you still meet a lot of people that know about esports, that are heavily invested in games, and that's very reminiscent of Korea. But coming from Europe, I can tell you it's really night and day. You go into a cap in Korea and the cap driver knows StarCraft, knows Heroes, knows Overwatch, knows all these games. So all of a sudden you're like, hey, I like this.
Well, what I like is getting into the game, and we are ready here, finally, for game number 1 between SPT and Team BlossoM. We are going to be underway here in just a moment as we head into game number 1. Well, we are just about ready as we get this game underway. It will be SPT. It will be on the left in blue here. Your number 1 Chinese representatives is, we'll take just one moment before we do head into game as we have a minor issue we're going to take a look at.
Yeah, I think there was something with the hotkeys here, but from what I can tell, the player has already fixed that, so we should head into this any second right now. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Again, the early game is maybe going to be a little bit rough for SPT. If they can find kills, it would be fantastic. The triple melee setup is definitely going to shield Junkrat on the side of Team BlossoM. It's going to be the most important part here. And on the wave clear side, we're definitely seeing the Koreans with a bit of an advantage.
All right, we are ready here as that has been taken care of, and it is time to start game number 1. Again, your number 1 team out of China here is going to be SPT on the left in blue. And, of course, the number 1 player that we'll be looking at is going to be Misaka on that front line, seeing what he can do on that Muradin, but Melody C most notably on that Zeratul.
Yeah, Melody C is going to have, there's a lot of responsibility on his shoulder right now, a lot of pressure to really make the plays here. Whereas when we're looking over to the other side, of course, we're also looking again onto Diablo. It's all about having the engagers and really being able to engage into these fights and create the opportunities for the rest of the team.
Honkono says, look, I don't have many souls. It doesn't take much for me to take about 25% of my life, but Diablo, one of his better stacking maps in terms of the PvE, but we know since rework, Diablo, obviously much easier, especially with that W build that we've seen so prominent in competitive play. Also going Feast on Fear to make sure he gets more of that healing when he does get those stuns. And on Tomb of the Spider Queen, a lot of walls, a lot of terrain you can bank those heroes into.
Consumer Vitality taken for Leoric on the level 1 talents, and no Austin's renewal for him here. More so the Chinese style here than what we're normally seeing out of Korea. But also, again, the stacking process for Muradin, and that can really help later on trying to confirm one of these skills with a bit of extra damage. But in the early game, I'm personally really curious to see how is SPT going to run these rotations here. How are they going to be able to stop BlossoM from turning it early?
Yeah, one of the things that Snitch mentioned was trying to control that bot lane. Just looking at the minimap, you can already see Zeratul made his presence felt in the bottom lane as the rotations top bottom. But see BlossoM getting an early camp out of the way. That's going to get started on the other side as well for SPT. So both teams seeing if they can establish some control, maybe get some early structure damage in that mid lane to prep the first web weavers, whoever gets that first turn in.
I mean, what we're seeing for now is Displays holding the bot lane. We're actually having Deckard also, in general, both of the teams heading straight for the mercenary camps here, trying to create a bit more pressure through the mid lane. But as expected, that Zeratul currently up at the top. I would still like to see some rotations of Zeratul, trying to see if he can maybe jump onto that bot lane every now and then, put some pressure onto Blaze here. Because for Leoric, that's in the long run a losing matchup, especially if he starts like missing out on a few of the drains. So whenever Zeratul comes down and puts the pressure onto Blaze, you take some of that pressure from Leoric himself, and it allows him to push out farther in the lane.
Well, there's some zone control. There's going to be a concussion mine. That's going to knock a few members up, and that's going to be Jimmy Rayner here as first blood. It's a nice heads-up play there with the start by Merryday. We know him in his past to be the playmaking support. There, he makes sure to get the root and the follow-up there to get the first kill.
Yeah, it was a really, really nice push that we saw in the mid lane, and it was just BlossoM jumping with 5 heroes into the middle, getting the kill, nearly getting the second one against Leoric too, and they already broke through the gate. So it's really all about trying to prepare the gates and the waves for the first web weavers. If you can just snowball that process of securing a few structures for yourself, then you're going to get more and more value out of the first objective, and that's what BlossoM is clearly aiming for here.
Right now, neither team getting much in the way of turn-in. Only 6 gems turned in on the side of SPT, but nearing the total amount needed is both teams. We'll see who can establish control. Again, getting that zoning control over that is one of the things that does allow you, especially with those grenades, the Junkrat of that nature, allows you to poke down.
I really like the attempt here from Honkono and Gonda on the Diablo and Thrall combo to get a good lockdown against Muradin, and just after Diablo moves in, get the Wolf connected and try to push more damage onto the front line of SPT. It didn't quite work out for them, but if they coordinate that well in those engages, you can really start to pressure Muradin very heavily. And especially in the later stage of the game, you have the potential of Thrall specking into the Alpha Wolf. That would definitely threaten Muradin a lot. It would make it maybe even to a point where you need to fire an Ancestral through to keep him alive, and that's a big cooldown that you have to burn there.
We saw that start to take priority towards the end of Western Clash, especially when you look at the high health pool warriors that are kind of so prominent, especially the Garrosh that we saw most notably used against. But as we can see, there's going to be Leoric just able to get away as Honkono coming down. He's lurking around, but Wiz sitting on those 21 gems should be able to establish a turn-in.
I really like what you just added. It's not only that Alpha Wolf in itself is a great talent no matter who you go up against, but if you're going up against the very high hit point heavy tanks that are currently so dominant, I mean, you have Diablo, you have Muradin, the Garrosh that you mentioned, then that talent, of course, gets even more value. So that's absolutely fantastic if you can set the combos up.
There it is.
Talking combos, there we have it. Yeah, Misaka immediately has to hop out. That was a close call since Merryday was already here with a follow-up.
Yeah, Merryday's like, can I get in on this action? He's like, look, you guys are getting all the roots, having all the fun. He did get the one to set up that first kill, but now we've got Web Weavers underway here for BlossoM. We'll see how much they can get out of this first push as Honkono still trying to make a place. Lucky he's going to be rooted.
Lucky, though, it's not quite that lucky. Once again, Reyna goes down. That's the second kill against him, and BlossoM pushing now through the mid lane here with the Web Weavers, and that's exactly what we were worried about in the draft. Do they have the wave clear that they need to defend against the Web Weavers? And so far, it does really not look like it.
Gondar did just use his root on that on Misaka, unable to follow up there. ZZH able to walk away, but Honkono and team, they're going forward. Melody Z, he's got to be careful. There's going to be another play. The cleanse was used.
Misaka is also in trouble. He needs to be very careful here, and Honkono is already angling for the kill. He's trying to go in, and that's the second one confirmed. Down goes Zeratul and Murden, and that's an entire level lead already for BlossoM, and they're not done yet.
Well, you mentioned that, you got to get Murd into the late game. You've got to try and get those stacks, and Murd and post 13 and 16 is where he lives. But Kaldor, this type of pacing from BlossoM is going to make it difficult. He's had struggles getting that stacked up so far.
Yeah, exactly. Murden is currently sitting at 6 stacks only, and we're currently talking about 5.5 minutes. That's really not where you want to be. Honkono already completed his own quest. He stacked fully on souls now. We're having also, of course, the level 1 talent on Thrall completed, so Gondar has now the extra charge available. So far, things are not looking pretty for China. SPT is struggling, and at half level that BlossoM needs to get 10 could really make all the difference. If they get heroic abilities in a second turn-in, that might be a complete snowball against SPT.
Oh, wow, that penetrating round, trying to buy time. Lucky's trying to get away, but here comes the assault. There's going to be another route. Lucky able to walk away, but Zeratul is not, as another takedown here for BlossoM.
And they're doing exceptionally well here right now. This is actually fantastic play from BlossoM, getting kill after kill, 5 against 0, and we're looking at them trying to go for another turn-in. They need a few more gems, but they're absolutely controlling the entire center of the map, and with level 10 abilities now in their hands, SPT has to fall back, but instead we're actually seeing Misaka far out here. He jumps up, but he needs to be really careful. There's so much CC on the side of BlossoM, even as Muradin. You can't just simply show up there and say like, hey boys, how you doing?
Honkono is relentless when he plays, and on this Diablo fully stacked, as you mentioned, he can be very proactive. And Kaldor, you're pointing out the Thrall heroic of choice here.
Yeah, we're going into Sundering here, so even trying to stack a bit more CC on top of that chain. And if that is just timed well, you can destroy anyone in this setup now.
The amount of CC that they have, I mean, you get the initial lockdown.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, you can start with a Sundering, you can end with a Sundering. I mean, at any point of the game, you can just get in there. Obviously, the Lightning Breath, the control there, and Honkono just moving around, looking for any chance. Somebody steps forward. There's going to be the first one. Here comes the Web Weaver even getting in on the action. There's the Lightning Breath. The Sunder came down a little late, but it doesn't matter. Misaka fell.
Yeah, and here's where the pain comes. You don't have a level 10 SPT, that is. They just lost a hero. We have a 2-level lead already for BlossoM, and they're now pushing aggressively through 3 lanes already. Leoric might be able to save the bot lane, but that's about it. The middle is already about to fall here. And this is just devastating. I mean, SPT at least has level 10 abilities now, but this is still a game where it's all about BlossoM. If they don't make a massive mistake here, it's going to be tough for SPT to force a fight that brings them back into this.
The way that BlossoM has been playing, I'm curious if they're just going to put their foot in the ground, stand, and then try and look for a fight, or whether they're going to try and make more of a play around a boss or a camp. And it looked like they had their camp or the boss in mind.
I mean, once they have 13, they can easily make that play for boss, especially if they maybe push a little bit through the bot lane, push out the wave, and then wait until someone shows and then make the rotation top. They have a lot of control. If you go for the boss fight, you're in a situation where you can easily go for bunker, you have the Lornado at hand. We get Entomb for Leoric. There's one hero that's hasn't made a choice yet on level 10.
Hey, look, Jimmy likes to give him some pepper, and you can give him more pepper when you auto-attack faster, and Bloodlust does that.
The only problem that I have with that, I mean, if you look at that setup, I'm just not sure if you get any Bloodlust value, considering that a Sundering can already stop you on the attract. You have the bunker still delayed it a little bit, the Tornado too. But here comes the fight, and Bloodlust it is. Not popping it just yet, but having it ready for sure here, as SPT is trying a bit of a Hail Mary move maybe to go back into this. BlossoM, of course, delaying it to 13, but they are still willing to take the fight here. Void Prism in the back though, hitting 3.
They've got Honkono isolated. He's just trying to get back in, saying, can I get any type of protection at all? And he does get that by way of the bunker. Sunder also comes out as well. Here comes the root, but a nice cleanse there on Lucky.
Going in one again, Misaka in trouble. The follow-up is there, but he's still able to jump out. I have to say though, BlossoM is playing this really well, obviously. They are so far ahead here, but there's still quite a few mistakes when it comes to coordination. The Sundering that we've now seen a few times hasn't really gained a lot of value for the team. Even in that last attempt, he didn't hit anything there. It was more so trying to save Diablo, but he already had the bunker on the ground, and Diablo could use that to move out. So there was a bit of overlap when it came to rogue abilities. Doesn't matter for this game so far, but it's definitely something that can be exploited later down the road.
Well, for SPT, that fight, it didn't net them the kills, but it netted them some space as it forced BlossoM to retreat. Leork was able to get out, was sitting on quite a few gems, and Honkono goes in instantly. Melody C, but we've got the lockdown with the Entomb.
Entomb comes in and hits 2 here, but SPT is already moving back, not really capitalizing on it with any damage. They got their web weavers, but of course they are still the talent behind in the 2 levels. So even from a stats perspective, they are already quite weak here. Their goal has to be drop a couple of walls, get at least a few structures here to start closing that gap. But BlossoM is setting up a super nice defense.
Wiz, they're going in. Misaka dives right over Zeratul with the follow-up. Wiz comes in with the stun, and now the rest of the team. There's a Sunder. That's going to hit multiple members. They get the lockdown. They're trying to get more.
And there's the first one. Rhaegar goes down, and that's only the first to fall since we are already seeing the Riptire coming through. They're going for Lucky again, but he's actually not getting pushed in and might be able to walk away from this, especially with Zeratul immediately falling up with a Void Prison. Misaka, though, trying to buy some time, but immediately locked down. Great space control from BlossoM.
Yeah, the Avatar's going to be used. We'll see if he actually makes it out of here alive, and it looks like that retreat might be enough. Soap trying to survive in this 1v1. He is sitting on 46 gems. He's lit it. That's a painful loss.
When you're playing Entomb with the Spider Queen, one of the mechanics that can always bring you back into the game is, of course, a gem mechanic. If you can hold on to them, then even if you're a talent or 2 behind, in the long run, you might be able to get those stagger turn-ins, get the first one, get follow up with another one, and slowly but steadily, not only get ahead in experience, but also maybe dominate the map. If you lose the gems here, as we just saw, though, then your comeback potential is significantly diminished.
I'm telling you, Caldor, one of the things I'm enjoying the most right now is the return of Merryday. Yes, he's been in the league for 5 weeks. Yes, he's had 7 series under his belt, but for him to make these plays on land, he has reminded people who he is and who he was. That is a playmaker on support, because all of those Lornados, they're making sure he's used defensively. The roots he's had, the Lornado even offensively timed. It's beautiful to watch right now.
Just seeing him on stage here is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It's good to have him back for sure, and he's already looking to make these plays again. And talking about the plays, we are seeing BlossoM pushing through the mid lane. They want the keep at this point. You're so close to level 16, you want to grab that extra talent and you try to set yourselves ahead heavily in structures. Bot lane, of course, is going to destroy a fort. The top lane is pushing out as well, but BlossoM is 5-manning in the mid right now. But they just now pick 16, and this is the moment when you want to make your play for keep.
They really need keep. Anything less than a keep at this point, I feel, would be a loss and allow SPT more time to get back into this. So SPT is actually doing a very good job of holding. It looks like this should fall here momentarily, but now they've got to hold on to the rest. But Honkono says, hold on, what if we speed this bad boy up a little bit? Soap comes in, he's the first to fall. DP's down.
Void Prison is in play. Here comes the Lightning Breath as they're trying to go for it once again. Misaka is the next target here, but the Riptire comes out and is trying to aim for the backline. But nice play here by Rhaegar. ZZH actually saving a Lucky and Melody C.
Right now, SPT's holding on, but for how long is the top web weaver starting to push down that top keep? That 1 keep was great. Now 2 keeps, and we're looking at a 4-level lead. They might just turn their attention directly to the core. They are feeling it right now, trying to take home game number 1.
I'm really liking the synergy with Diablo and the stuns that are coming from Thrall and from Blaze. Very well coordinated here in the late game as they're looking for these kills, trying to pressure SPT even more. They're starting to go for the core here. This is really one of those moments where against other teams you might have fallen back, but the 4-level lead is saying it all already. We are having BlossoM with a play for game.
They're just flexing on him right now. They're trying to take down game number 1. They're doing whatever it takes. And right now, SPT does not have the firepower just yet, but without the minions, BlossoM, they fall back, wait for the next round of minions, and look for somebody to overstep. Right now, that's Misaka, but he is on Murden, so he's able to survive. But they're trying to play around the minions, and for now, they're holding on. They did lose 24% of their core, but the fact that they're still holding on shows their resiliency.
This is one of those situations where you have to question, okay, what do you do if you're BlossoM? Do you make the immediate boss play? Do you wait for a few more gems and get the turn in? Because you're 4 levels ahead, but you also have to think about what could happen for us to lose the game. Do we have to make the boss play right now? We have a massive advantage, but how big is the chance that they can maybe steal away from us? And they're just looking for more fights, and SPT is willing to give them to them. And that's one of those things that's really surprising. If you're SPT, you should not be in that spot.
Lightning Breath going to get the slow, see if they can get the follow-up. Lucky he gets a heal, but I'm pretty sure he's not making it out of here, but that might buy enough time. Lucky he's trapped in a corner. Riptire comes in, gets another takedown. Honkono and team, they're looking for another.
Yeah, they're getting 3 here. First of all, Reina got unlucky, and then we have Murden blown apart too. Now we're seeing them just moving in for the core here. 3.5 level lead. BlossoM is just looking fantastic in 1. It's 12 kills against 0. SPT hasn't taken a single kill in this game.
Well, we had the solo support, or the solo assassin Junkrat At least range-wise, we do have that throw in there, but it didn't matter. There was so much CC, so much lockdown. The playmaking potential from the CC combos alone for BlossoM seemed to be more than enough to get what seems to be more mounting kills, as Hong Kono is relentless. He doesn't care about the core, he cares about the kills, as it ends up being 18-15, 13-0 shutout in terms of kills.
Not quite the start that you want to have with the number 1 going up against the number 4 here. And we come back to that Zeratul pick in the early game. Once we saw the first web weavers coming down, SPT really struggling to hold on to any kind of map control.
Snitch, now that you're back up here, takes on game number 1, and how well BlossoM looks.
I mean, what a statement game from BlossoM, honestly. We said this series is the one that could be up in the air, but they're here to show that Korea, you know, they're here to play and they're here to win. Absolutely flawless game from BlossoM. Even in their early game rotations, as we said, we identified the Zeratul could be a problem in their early rotation, but the early hard camp especially, to be able to like force down mid, get his experience as soon as possible from that mid wall. Like, they were just playing so well in the early game, and I think it snowballed so fast.
We got to see all the CC follow-up between these two teams, and it was Mary Day either leading the charge, Hong Kono leading the charge, the concussion mine, the follow-up, the synergy definitely seemed to be there with this composition. That amount of CC, I don't think there was enough cleanses on the other side of SPT that could have saved some of those targets.
I mean, it was the same MO over and over again. You saw Diablo with the engage, the flip, and then immediately it was either Blaze or Thrall. Both of them are ready, they follow it up, and then the damage is there. And you can't really save anyone. And they also had the perfect engagers with the flanks that they executed. So it was really well done. And once, I mean, at the moment that Soap dies on Leoric with the 46 gems, you know there's going to be trouble in this game. That's probably the last straw that we saw in this.
They did have that turn in mid-game that they picked Bloodlust, they tried that fight, didn't get the kill, but it bought them space, so that allowed them a chance to get back into the game. But when you look at the CC, sometimes the best CC defense is some CC of your own. Then you look at Muradin, he's got the Storm Bolt, was unsuccessful in a lot of those, then he's got the slow. Leoric got a slow, Rhaegar has a slow. Those are very difficult things that when you have that much pressure coming at you, slows don't necessarily buy you enough time in those situations, and the pressure just seemed relentless from BlossoM, and they just didn't have a way to punch back in a lot of those engagements.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at SPT, you know, looking at the draft they had, I think we expected just them to play the game differently. Like, it felt like they just drafted a 5v5 and they were hoping they'd get something in the long run, you know, with Void Prison. They had some tools, you know, with the Bloodlust as well. They had some tools to be able to take a team fight, but it's never going to get there evenly with the way they played this game. Like, I think just looking at it from, like, its tomb, obviously, it's not the right word, but the macro perspective, like, BlossoM were just rotating so much better. They had a lot of better idea of their win conditions, and it just felt like SPT was so much slower. Yeah, and so when you have these competitions where they struggle with the CC, it wasn't even a close match.
It also felt that when you think about the composition that SPT was running, every time you have a Reyna in the mix, it's all about protecting Jimmy. And they did a pretty poor job at the beginning of the game to make that happen. Reyna was always the target, and BlossoM found the engages against him. So we saw Lucky die several times here early on, where you want to protect him and have him to be the damage dealer that is under no pressure, they just can shell away here. And they never really came into their play. Also, Bloodlust, I mean, it's a little bit silly for us to expect Ancestral from a Chinese team, to be honest, so that's definitely my mistake. But at the same time, it kind of felt they didn't really get anything out of it.
It was very limited in terms of what they got. Sometimes you just go for it. You got to find that clutch play, that one moment that you can get back into the game. He sat on it for a while, so there was some deliberation, obviously, but they looked for that one fight. We're hoping that one fight could turn it around. Stitch, what's the wildest heroic that you've locked in and say, you know what, things aren't going well, we're just going to go for it?
I mean, we're never behind in any game I've ever played, so I mean, I have no reason to look in a wild heroic. But I mean, I didn't think the Bloodlust was too bad here. I think, again, it's the falling behind in the early game that's what really bid them. I think if they end up with a situation where they find a solid Void, they set up the Bloodlust, and they just mow them down with the Raynor, it could have happened, you know, but the way SPT's early game went, they just never found an even footing, and they could never find a fight like that.
I really like the map choice that we have here on the side of Team BlossoM. They're saying, you want a team fight? We're going to give you some team fights.
This is definitely a Korean special. The team fights are aplenty. That 13 kills to 0 for BlossoM. Their execution was almost flawless in that composition. I don't know if there was ever really a time where I was like, man, is anybody going to die here? Hong Kono, you know, there was a time, but Diablo is so tanky with souls. With Battlefield of Eternity, a different meta than what we saw on Tomb of the Spider Queen. The likes of Hanzo, who we didn't see last game, definitely rises in priority here. So if he gets banned out, we start opening up the chances that maybe we get the Tracer to come back. We know that Tracer's fallen off. Kind of requires some certain drafts, some certain opposition to be more effective than not. But I think in this situation, Zeratul is one of those heroes that can be effective on Battlefield of Eternity.
The one thing that it comes down to for me with the positions that we saw in the last game is also just simply how you position your composition, because that's something that especially BlossoM did really well. They had a heavy front line, they had the setup with Diablo, Blaze and Thrall as well. No one really got to Junkrat throughout the entire game, so it was a massive problem for SPT trying to get a kill here. Not quite sure what you thought about that, but I feel the backline of SPT was just too exposed. They always allowed either Blaze or Diablo to make the engage, and Muradin just wasn't able to shield them.
Yeah, I mean, it did consistently feel like an issue. Diablo was finding a lot of engages throughout the game, a lot of solid wall charges on either Zeratul or, you know, Raynor. It was happening a lot. But it's still, it keeps stemming back to this early game for me. Like, I think, you know, if they have an even footing, if they can find their team fight that they want, there's a chance that SPT could take it here. I think Battlefield is a map where, you know, they have a lot more opportunities in the early game to maybe find some picks, maybe find a little bit of a safer early game even if they want that. Obviously, we'll see a lot of different styles on Battlefield with like the different race styles and stuff like that. So this could be maybe a better map for them, just based off how I saw the Tomb game go. But I'm not too confident with how dominant BlossoM seemed.
The way that we see Korea execute is all about aggression. Their top 4 teams are known for it. BlossoM is, it seems like they're trying to fit that role of the other 3 teams. And right there, getting off to that good start, it's just, when I think about Team BlossoM and I think, man, if they could execute this way against some of the top 3 Korean teams, it's like, man, if you do this on a consistent basis, the only problem is the other Korean teams are trying to do the exact same thing to you. Is this a moment where China needs to try and fight fire with fire to say, hey, look, if you're going to be aggressive, we can be aggressive right back? Because we know that China has aggression in them. But is it just a time? Is it time to just say, hey, look, we're bringing out the big guns here. We're not going to play the slower early game. We're just going to come out swinging.
I mean, I feel, again, like BlossoM dominated and they did extremely well here. But we pointed out during the game that there were a few moments where there were also mistakes. There was no follow-up after Diablo found the engage, or the CC afterwards misses. The Sunderings were not always completely on point. The attempted save against or for Diablo was executed by 2 heroes, staggering those heroic abilities on top of each other. So there are a few mistakes that you can try and exploit here, but for that to happen, SPT has to really step up their execution. And if that doesn't happen, then I think they're going to have a very, very tough time in this game now. But if BlossoM goes up against another Korean team, all of a sudden you have 2 teams with extremely high mechanical skills and execution level, and then mistakes like that, or forced mistakes, are going to be exploited. So I feel this is the one thing where they still have to improve a little bit. But again, it's the first game of the day, so normally we start a little bit slow. I mean, this bad boy knows all about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're very nervous up there. After all, Merry Day, very fresh to the scene.